Have you ever noticed how the harder you squeeze water in your palm, the more it escapes through your fingers? How the more desperately you chase sleep, the more elusive it becomes? How the more forcefully you demand respect, the less you receive? This isn't coincidence. It's a fundamental principle of existence that the ancient Stoics understood deeply. The paradox that control comes through surrender, that strength comes through yielding, that success comes through letting go of the desperate need to succeed. We live in a world that worships force. Push harder, grind more, hustle longer, never give up, break through walls, conquer your goals, crush the competition. We've created an entire culture around the idea that life is a battle to be won through sheer force of will. But what if this entire paradigm is not just wrong, but actively working against us? What if the very act of forcing is what creates the resistance we're trying to overcome? Marcus Aurelius, while leading the Roman Empire through war and plague, discovered something that seems paradoxical. The more he accepted what he couldn't control, the more power he had over what he could control. Epictetus, who lived as a slave, found freedom not through breaking his chains, but through understanding what was truly his to command. Seneca, surrounded by the corruption and excess of Nero's court, found peace not by fighting the chaos around him, but by cultivating order within himself. These weren't passive men who gave up on life. They were among the most accomplished, influential, and effective people of their time. Yet they understood something we've forgotten in our modern obsession with force. Life is not a wall to be broken through, but a river to be navigated. When you stop forcing and start flowing, you don't become weak or passive. You become like water itself, soft yet powerful, yielding yet persistent, shapeless yet capable of carving through solid rock. The illusion of control that keeps us forcing. Let's start with a brutal truth that your ego doesn't want to hear. Most of what you're trying to control is fundamentally outside your power. The Stoics divided all things into two categories: what is up to us and what is not up to us. What's up to us? Our judgments, our decisions, our responses, our efforts. What's not up to us? Literally everything else. The outcomes of our efforts, other people's actions, the past, the future, our reputation, our health, even whether we wake up tomorrow. But watch how you live. You try to force people to like you, to see your worth, to treat you fairly. You try to force outcomes, demanding that your efforts produce specific results. You try to force the future to match your plans. You try to force your body to never age, your loved ones to never leave, your success to never fade. And in all this forcing, you create suffering not from the events themselves, but from your resistance to reality. Consider a simple example. You're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. You grip the steering wheel, your jaw clenches, you curse at the cars ahead, you weave between lanes trying to gain a few seconds. Your body floods with stress hormones, your mind races with catastrophic scenarios. You arrive at the meeting, frazzled, sweaty, and radiating tension. Did all that forcing move the traffic 1 inch faster? Did your stress make you less late, or did it simply add suffering to an already challenging situation? Now imagine the same scenario approached with Stoic wisdom. The traffic is what it is. You cannot control it. What you can control is your response. You accept the situation, call ahead to notify about the delay, use the time to prepare mentally for the meeting or listen to something enriching. You arrive late but composed, apologetic but not frantic. The external situation is identical, but the internal experience is completely different. This is what happens when you stop forcing and start flowing. The illusion of control is seductive because occasionally forcing seems to work. You push hard enough and the door opens. You demand loudly enough and you get your way. You manipulate skillfully enough and people do what you want. But these victories are Pyrrhic. The door you forced open slams shut behind you. The people you manipulated resent and distrust you. The success you demanded crumbles because it wasn't built on solid foundation, but on unsustainable pressure. Real power, the Stoics understood, comes not from controlling externals, but from mastering internals. When you stop wasting energy trying to force what's outside your control and focus entirely on what's within it, you become paradoxically more effective in the external world, not because you're controlling it, but because you're responding to it with wisdom rather than reaction, with strategy rather than force. The exhaustion of constant resistance. Think about your typical day. From the moment you wake up, you're in resistance mode. You resist getting out of bed, forcing yourself up with multiple alarms. You resist the weather, complaining about rain or heat or cold. You resist your commute, fighting against traffic or crowds. You resist your work, forcing yourself through tasks you don't want to do. You resist other people's behaviors, constantly wishing they were different. You resist your own thoughts and feelings, trying to force yourself to feel confident when you're anxious, happy when you're sad, energetic when you're tired. This constant resistance is exhausting. It's like trying to swim upstream every moment of your life. No wonder you collapse into bed at night, depleted and discouraged, only to wake up the next morning to begin the battle again. But what if there's another way? What if instead of resisting life, you could move with it? The Stoics had a concept called amor fati, love of fate. This doesn't mean being passive or resigned to whatever happens. It means accepting what has happened and what is happening as the starting point for your response. Instead of wasting energy wishing things were different, you invest that energy in making the best of what is. When you stop forcing, you stop creating unnecessary resistance. The alarm goes off, and instead of resistance, there's acceptance. This is the time I chose to wake up. The weather is what it is, and you dress accordingly without emotional drama. The commute is an opportunity for reading, thinking, or simply being present. Work becomes a chance to practice virtue, to contribute, to grow, regardless of whether you love every task. This might sound like lowering your standards or giving up on your dreams. It's neither. It's about choosing where to invest your energy. When you stop forcing what can't be controlled, you have more energy for what can be. When you stop fighting reality, you can start working with it. When you stop exhausting yourself in resistance, you have strength for creation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." The present is where life actually happens. It's the only place where you have any real power. When you're forcing, you're usually trying to control the future or change the past. When you're flowing, you're fully engaged with what's actually here, now, in front of you. And paradoxically, this present-focused approach is what actually creates a better future. The practice of Wu Wei and Stoic acceptance. Although Wu Wei is a Taoist concept meaning non-action or effortless action, it perfectly complements Stoic philosophy. It's not about doing nothing, it's about acting in accordance with nature rather than against it. It's about finding the path of least resistance that's also the path of greatest effectiveness. Watch a master martial artist. They don't meet force with force. They redirect their opponent's energy, using it against them. A small person can throw a much larger one, not through superior strength, but through superior technique, working with forces rather than against them. This is Wu Wei in action, and it's exactly what the Stoics practiced in their approach to life. When someone insults you, the forcing response is to insult them back, or defend yourself vigorously. The flowing response is to consider whether there's any truth in their words that you can learn from, then let the rest pass through you, like wind through trees. You don't resist the insult which would give it power. You don't accept it as truth which would harm you. You simply let it be what it is, someone else's opinion which is not yours to control. When you face a setback, the forcing response is to immediately push harder, to refuse to accept defeat, to double down on the same approach that isn't working. The flowing response is to accept the setback as information, to learn from it, to adjust your approach, perhaps even to recognize that this particular path is closed and another might be opening. This doesn't mean you become passive or weak. Water is not weak. It carved the Grand Canyon. It can destroy cities, but it doesn't do this through force. It does it through persistence, patience, and always finding the path forward, even if that path means going around, under, or through in unexpected ways. The Stoics practiced what they called the discipline of desire wanting what happens rather than demanding that what you want must happen. This sounds like giving up on goals, but it's actually about holding goals lightly while pursuing them wholeheartedly. You work toward what you want, but you don't depend on achieving it for your well-being. You're like an archer who aims carefully, draws the bow with full strength, releases with perfect technique, then accepts wherever the arrow lands, knowing that wind, movement, and countless factors outside their control influence the outcome. Relationships, the ultimate testing ground. Nowhere is the difference between forcing and flowing more evident than in relationships. Watch how most people approach relationships. They try to force others to love them, to understand them, to meet their needs. They have rigid expectations of how others should behave. They manipulate, pressure, guilt, and control, and they wonder why their relationships are sources of stress rather than joy. A Stoic approach to relationships is radically different. You recognize that other people's feelings, thoughts, and actions are not yours to control. You can influence through your own behavior, but you cannot force. This isn't indifference or detachment, it's actually the foundation for genuine love and connection. When you stop trying to force someone to love you, you become more lovable. When you stop demanding that others meet your needs, you become more capable of meeting your own needs and genuinely serving others. When you stop trying to change people, you create space for them to change themselves or not, which is their choice. Think about the relationships that have meant the most to you. Were they the ones where someone forced their way into your life, demanded your attention, manipulated your emotions? Or were they the ones that developed naturally, where you felt free to be yourself, where love grew from acceptance rather than pressure? Epictetus taught that we should behave in relationships like we're at a banquet. When a dish comes to you, take a moderate portion. When it passes by, don't grab after it. When it hasn't arrived yet, don't reach across the table demanding it. Apply this to relationships. Appreciate people when they're present in your life. Don't grasp after them when they need space. Don't demand what they're not ready to give. This approach actually creates deeper, more authentic connections. When people don't feel forced or manipulated, they're free to show up authentically. When they know you'll be okay whether they stay or go, they're more likely to stay. When they feel accepted as they are, they're more likely to grow toward their best selves. But this requires tremendous inner strength. It requires being complete in yourself, rather than needing others to complete you. It requires finding your worth internally rather than in others' validation. It requires loving without attachment, caring without controlling, being present without possessing. Work and achievement. Effort without force. The modern workplace is built on force. Force yourself to wake up early. Force yourself to commute. Force yourself through 8 or more hours of tasks. Force yourself to meet arbitrary deadlines. Force yourself to care about metrics that don't align with your values. Force yourself to compete with colleagues. Force yourself to network, to self-promote, to play politics. But what if you approached work with flow instead of force? This doesn't mean slacking off or not caring about excellence. It means aligning your efforts with natural principles rather than arbitrary pressures. First, consider whether your work aligns with your values and strengths. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, not just universal nature, but your individual nature. If you're forcing yourself into a career that fundamentally conflicts with who you are, no amount of success will bring satisfaction. Sometimes the most stoic action is to stop forcing yourself down the wrong path and find one that aligns with your nature. But even in less than ideal work situations, you can practice flow. Instead of forcing yourself through tasks with gritted teeth, find ways to engage with them that feel natural. Maybe you turn routine tasks into opportunities to practice mindfulness. Maybe you challenge yourself to find more efficient methods. Maybe you focus on how your work serves others, even in small ways. The Stoics viewed work as an opportunity to practice virtue. Every task, no matter how mundane, is a chance to exercise excellence, justice, wisdom, and self-discipline. When you approach work this way, it stops being something you force yourself through and becomes something that flows from your commitment to virtue. This shift in approach often leads to better results, with less stress. When you're not wasting energy on resistance and resentment, you have more energy for actual performance. When you're not forcing outcomes, you're more able to see creative solutions. When you're not stressed about results you can't control, you're more able to focus on the effort you can control. Marcus Aurelius, remember, didn't want to be emperor. He would have preferred a life of philosophy. But once the role was thrust upon him, he didn't resist or resent it. He flowed with it, finding ways to practice philosophy through governing, to serve Rome while serving wisdom. He didn't force himself to love being emperor, but he found meaning in doing the job with excellence. The paradox of letting go and getting more. Here's the strangest thing about stopping the force and starting the flow. You often get more of what you want when you stop desperately trying to get it. This isn't magical thinking or law of attraction nonsense. It's practical psychology and social dynamics. When you stop forcing people to like you, you become more likable because desperation is repulsive and authenticity is attractive. When you stop forcing success, you often become more successful because you're focused on process rather than outcome, on value creation rather than value extraction. When you stop forcing happiness, you often find it because happiness is a byproduct of living according to your values, not a goal to be achieved. This paradox confused me for years until I understood the mechanism. When you're forcing, you're operating from scarcity and fear. You're signaling to yourself and others that you don't believe you're enough, that you don't trust the process, that you're desperate. This creates the very resistance you're trying to overcome. People pull away from desperation. Opportunities dry up around fear. Your own mind rebels against constant pressure. When you're flowing, you're operating from abundance and trust. You're signaling that you're complete, confident, and capable. This attracts people and opportunities. Your own mind relaxes and becomes more creative and perceptive. You see possibilities you missed when you were fixated on forcing a specific outcome. The Stoics understood that virtue is its own reward. When you stop forcing external rewards and focus on being virtuous, wise, just, courageous, and disciplined, external rewards often follow. But even if they don't, you've already won because you've lived according to your principles. Practical techniques for daily flow. So how do you actually implement this in daily life? How do you shift from a lifetime of forcing to a practice of flowing? It starts with small, concrete changes in how you approach everyday situations. The morning routine. Instead of forcing yourself out of bed, try this. When the alarm goes off, simply notice the resistance without judgment. Say to yourself, I notice I'm resisting getting up. Then ask, what's one small movement I can make? Maybe it's just opening your eyes. Then another where? Maybe sitting up. No force, just gentle progressive movement. You'll find yourself out of bed with far less drama and stress. Decision making. When facing a decision, instead of forcing yourself to figure out the right answer, try this Stoic practice. Consider what a wise person would do in this situation. Not what they would force you to do, but what would naturally flow from wisdom. Often, the answer becomes clear when you stop pressuring yourself to find it. Difficult conversations. Instead of forcing your point across or forcing others to understand you, try flowing with the conversation. Listen more than you speak. Ask questions more than you make statements. Accept that understanding might not happen in this conversation, or ever. Focus on speaking your truth clearly and calmly, then let it land however it lands. Daily tasks. Choose one routine task each day to practice flow. Maybe it's washing dishes. Instead of forcing yourself through it while your mind is elsewhere, try flowing with it. Feel the water temperature. Notice the transformation from dirty to clean. Move at a pace that feels natural rather than rushed. You're not trying to enjoy it or pretend it's meaningful. You're just doing it without resistance. Dealing with difficult people. When someone is being difficult, instead of forcing them to be reasonable or forcing yourself to tolerate the intolerable, try this. Imagine they're a weather pattern. You don't argue with a storm or try to convince it to be sunny. You simply respond appropriately, taking shelter, wearing appropriate gear, waiting for it to pass. This isn't dehumanizing them, it's recognizing that their emotional weather is not yours to control. Planning and goals. Instead of forcing rigid adherence to plans, try holding them lightly. Make plans based on your best current information, then adjust as reality provides new data. Think of plans as hypotheses to be tested, rather than contracts that must be fulfilled. This doesn't mean being flaky or unreliable. It means being responsive to reality, rather than enslaved to outdated plans. The deeper transformation. As you practice flowing instead of forcing, something profound begins to happen. You start to notice how much energy you've been wasting on resistance. You realize how much suffering you've been creating through your own forcing. You discover capacities and possibilities that were always there, but hidden by your desperate need to control. Your relationships transform. People feel safer around you because they don't feel manipulated or pressured. They're drawn to your centeredness, your acceptance, your ability to be present without agenda. Conflicts decrease not because you avoid them, but because you don't create them through forcing your will on others. Your work becomes more sustainable. You might not climb the ladder as quickly as those who force their way up, but you also don't burn out or sacrifice your integrity. You find ways to contribute that align with your nature rather than against it. You might even discover that what you thought you wanted through forcing isn't what you actually want when you're flowing. Your inner life becomes peaceful. Not the peace of nothing happening, but the peace of being in harmony with what's happening. The constant inner war between what is and what you think should be gradually ends. You still have preferences, goals, and values, but you hold them in a way that doesn't create suffering when reality doesn't match them. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When you stop forcing against obstacles and start flowing with them, they often reveal themselves as opportunities. The difficult person teaches you patience. The setback redirects you towards something better. The loss makes space for something new. Conclusion: the invitation to flow. The invitation before you is not to become passive or to give up on your dreams. It's to pursue them in a way that works with life rather than against it. It's to recognize that you are not separate from life, fighting against it, but part of life, flowing with it. You're not a rock trying to stand firm against the river, you're water finding its way to the sea. This shift from forcing to flowing is not a one-time decision, but a daily practice. Every moment offers a choice. Will you force or will you flow? Will you resist or will you respond? Will you demand that life conform to your will, or will you find ways to work with what life presents? Start small. Choose one area of your life where you've been forcing and experiment with flowing instead. Maybe it's your morning routine, a challenging relationship, or a work situation. Don't force yourself to stop forcing moves. That would be missing the point entirely. Simply notice when you're forcing and gently experiment with relaxing that force, with finding a way to move forward that feels more like flowing with the current than swimming against it. Remember what Epictetus taught. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. This isn't resignation, it's wisdom. It's recognizing where your power actually lies, not in controlling events, but in responding to them with virtue. The river of life will flow whether you fight it or move with it. The choice is whether you'll exhaust yourself in resistance or find power in acceptance, whether you'll create suffering through forcing or find peace through flowing. The Stoics discovered this truth over 2,000 years ago. Modern life has made us forget it, but it remains as true today as it was then. When you stop forcing, life doesn't stop. It starts flowing in ways you couldn't have imagined when you were too busy forcing to notice. The path opens not because you broke through the wall, but because you stopped insisting there should be a wall to break through. The solution appears not because you forced it, but because you created space for it to emerge. This is the ultimate Stoic insight. True power comes not from controlling life, but from aligning with it. True strength comes not from resistance, but from resilience. True success comes not from forcing your will on the world, but from finding where your will and the world can flow together. The choice is yours, and it's available in every moment. Will you continue forcing, exhausting yourself against immovable realities, or will you begin to flow, finding the power that comes from working with life rather than against it? The river is already flowing. The only question is whether you'll keep fighting it or finally learn to swim with the current, discovering that what you thought was surrender is actually the deepest form of strength.